Good afternoon. Good morning, actually. My name is Alexia Tasouli. I'm a diplomatic correspondent from Nafteboriki TV. And our next session will focus on Europe's energy sources. The title of the panel is called A Historical Shift and the Greek Factor. We all heard before the statements of Mr. Staros Papastavrou, who said that Greece, regarding the vertical corridor from south to north, is a resilient alternative for Europe's energy security. So we will focus more on that. So allow me to welcome now Mr. Nikos Tsafos, Deputy Minister of Environment and Energy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Gergely Molnár, Gas Analyst on International Energy Agency. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Mr. Vasilis Nikitas, Economic Analyst on Economic and Financial Affairs of European Commission.
Good morning.
So I will start with Mr. Tsafos. Minister, we heard before the US Special Envoy, Mr. Volts, that he stressed also the importance of Greece. He also used the word commitment. So taking from that, I would like to ask you, what are Greece's energy strategy and how that is adapted to the new realities?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the question, and thank you to my co-panelists for joining me on the stage today. Always a pleasure to share the stage with friends. I think of Greece's energy strategy as sort of based on three core pillars: resources, geography, and the last one I would call it governance. So resources, we're a country that believes in exploiting the resources we have. Okay? So in the last few years, that has meant a big push for wind and solar because we have great wind and solar potential. We've been able to achieve a level of penetration that is among the top levels of penetration in the world. Wind and solar have also allowed us to become a net electricity exporter. 2019, this country imported about 18% of its needs in electricity. Last year, we turned that minus 18 to plus 5 or 6. That has been a huge shift. But betting on our own resources also means hydrocarbons. And no government has done more to expedite the search for hydrocarbons than this government, right? And you heard the minister this morning, there is a long-term yearning in this country to find out what we have. If we have it, how big is it? Can it be commercially exploited? And we are fully committed to that agenda because we see that in one way or another, Europe is going to need natural gas. And if Europe is going to be consuming gas, and if we can produce it, why not do that? So that's sort of one pillar. The second pillar is geography. Any energy strategy is based on the reality of where you sit in the world. We sit in a specific corner of the world. We are an entry point for natural gas. We are also, by the way, a major exporter of oil products. We import crude oil, we refine it, and we export it to the region. We are now an exporter of electricity. So we try to base our strategy based on the reality of where we sit in the world. So we've done a great job in the last few years of increasing connectivity, I would say, in the sort of north and northwest with Italy and TAP. The next phase is strengthening that, but also extending more to the Mediterranean with Cyprus and with Egypt, even Saudi Arabia, medium to long term, right? So we're trying to exploit our geographic position. And the last thing I would say is governance or rules. And here I would focus on two elements. One, we're part of a European energy system. And we want the system to work well, and B, we want this system to work in our advantage. So we have raised our voice at the EU level to shape the rules that govern the system so that the rules favor us as much as they favor others as they are written right now. But we also, at the same time, realize that the European project entails a very ambitious energy transition. We believe in that transition, but we believe in that transition with certain principles: cost effectiveness, technological neutrality, well-functioning markets, and putting the energy transition as part of a broader geostrategic agenda, right? So these are the three pillars of our energy strategy. It's resources, geography, and shaping the rules that affect us in a way that makes sense for us, but also makes sense for Europe.
Thank you. I will follow up on that regarding the costs. Mr. Molnár, how did Europe's gas supply mix evolved since 22-23 gas crisis, and how do you see the evolving role of LNG?
Thank you, Alexia, and good morning, colleagues. It is indeed a great pleasure to be today in the beautiful city of Athens and to share the panel with my esteemed colleagues. I think that when we are looking at the evolving role of LNG, we first need to go back to the 2022-2023 gas crisis, which certainly transformed both the European and the global gas markets in a profound and structural manner. I just would like to remind us that throughout 2022 and 23, Russian pipe gas deliveries to the European Union dropped by 80% or 120 BCM, which at the time roughly equated to around 1/4 of the global LNG market. And of course, this unprecedented shock drove up natural gas prices to an all-time high, led to a painful readjustment in natural gas demand, and very importantly, led to a reconfiguration of global LNG flows. And here, just to highlight that in 2022, the European Union increased by around 65% its LNG imports, very much supported by flexible US LNG. And while this was not sufficient to offset the decline in Russian pipe gas deliveries, this was certainly key to avoid a full-blown energy crisis. And it also resulted in a drastic shift in the role of LNG for the European market. In the 2010s, LNG was in a way the marginal molecule, accounting for roughly 10% of Europe's primary gas supply mix. In 2022, the share of LNG increased to around 35% and in a way became a source of baseload supply. And in the recent years, we have seen this trend to continue. Just when we are looking back to 2025, we see that Europe's LNG imports increased by around 30% because of stronger demand, because of higher storage injections, but also because of lower pipe gas imports from Russia. And as such, today the share of LNG is at around 40%. And when we are looking at sort of the medium term, we do expect that the importance of LNG will continue to strengthen in the European context. Just at the very start of this week, the European Union formally adopted its historic decision to fully phase out Russian natural gas at the latest by November 2027. And of course, this will naturally create additional market space for non-Russian energy suppliers. And in our estimates, LNG will account for more than half of the European Union's natural gas demand by the end of the decade. And as such, really becomes a structural source of baseload supply.
Thank you. Mr. Nikitas, we heard from both previous speakers the key developments and milestones that they have contributed in the historical shift of Europe energy sources. How this could be interesting to hear what the EU is doing to continue this shift.
Thank you, Alexia, and also to the organizers for inviting me, and also for being in this very nice panel together with Minister Tsafos and our colleague here from the International Energy Agency. So, I mean, just let me also say like the remarkable journey Greece has made. I've been involved in the energy sector somehow since 2018, and seeing now Greece being on the verge of phasing out lignite, having half of its production from renewables, and also, as the minister said, like becoming a net exporter of electricity. It's truly remarkable the transition, the journey Greece has made the last decade. So to your question, I would like to highlight two things. One is the political framework, where we have the European climate law, and then the money side, which is, as I'm part of DG ECFIN, we're looking at that quite closely. So the Recovery Resilience Facility, what the EU is providing. First, on the European climate law, which was adopted back in 2021, but sets the overall framework, of course. So the ambition is there. We want to make Europe the first climate neutral continent in the world by 2050. And we are on the way. So greenhouse gas emissions is about to reduce by 55%. That's a target by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. And just some weeks ago, the European Parliament and Member States agreed on a new target for 2040, which would mean that the reduction will go up to 90%. And I'm stressing this 2040 target because it included some important flexibilities as well. And I think the minister touched upon it a bit, and I also see that there is a panel speaking a bit about this dichotomy, or do you need to choose between green transition or competitiveness? And I don't want to go into too much into that to destroy for the other panel, but I want to mention that the European Commission is reacting. Last year we put forward the EU's Clean Industrial Deal, which is the European way to respond to how can we boost European industrial competitors' resilience and sustainability by combining economic growth with climate neutrality and focusing on energy-intensive sectors and clean technologies. Since then, and by this, the competitive compass that the Commission launched in 2025 in reaction to this well-published report by Draghi, we've seen an action plan on affordable energy, and more recently there was a grid package published by the Commission that proposes how we can proceed to modernize, expand, and secure Europe's energy networks. And let me also touch about the governance that the minister said, and especially I think an initiative that is close to the minister's heart. So we have the Energy Union Task Force, which has been established to enhance coordination of the Energy Union, to further integrate the energy systems and strengthen the governance of the electricity system. And I think the initiative is very much something that originated from Greece, and especially from the minister. So I think that will also contribute and hopefully support the quest for better governance. So just conscious of time, let me just say a few words on the money side. So we have the Recovery Resilience Facility, which is a total financial envelope of 577 billion euros. Out of this, 360 billion are in grants, the other is loans. And let me highlight just a couple of key features. So at least 37% of those funds needs to go into green measures. Second is that it's a performance-based tool, and the national plans mixes reforms and investment measures. And I want to also highlight two. So RF has been running since 2021. It's coming to an end this year. So some results, I want to highlight two here as well. So the equivalent of 1/3 of all new renewable capacity deployed in the European Union between 2021 and 2024 is supported by the RRF. This is expected to deliver some 61 gigawatt of new renewable installed capacity. Just linking it to the discussion about phasing out gas and the decision to phase out the Russian gas, this is equivalent of 16% of Russian gas imports since 2021. Second, the RRP include investments in over 21,000 megawatts of new transmission distribution capacity. That's enough to carry the full output of around 5,125 new onshore wind turbines. And finally, just let me say just a quick few words about the Greek RRP. The overall budget is almost 36 billion. So if you take that per capita, it's actually the largest plan in the EU member states. Out of the 36 billion, more than half are grants. And the implementation is progressing well. Greece has so far received over 23 billion, so 65% of total area-free envelope. But as the minister will say, like, it's also important that we'll need to finish well. And we are now in the final stage. Greece has close to half of its milestones still to complete. But I think with so there will be a strong push for the public administration, but also from private contractors that need to complete their investments on time. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning the money issue on behalf of the European Commission, because that gives me the opportunity to ask the Minister, what are the priorities for bringing energy costs down?
Obviously, energy cost is, I would say, the number one thing that we're focused on at the Ministry of Energy. And so when I think about energy costs, we try to break down the problem. So there are certain parts of energy, and particularly electricity costs, which we cannot control. The price of natural gas in Europe, the price of CO2 in Europe. So there are certain things that are sort of outside of our control. We monitor, we can help shape at the margin, but we're essentially recipients of this world. The second thing is, Greece relative to the rest of the EU, and here we've had a huge progress. 2019 we had the most expensive wholesale price in Europe. I was just looking at the numbers for January so far. It's remarkable. So far in the month, Greece has a lower wholesale price than Germany. We have 109, which is very high. Bulgaria next to us is 150. We have a 40 euro difference relative to Bulgaria. This used to be the other way around. It used to be that Bulgaria had 30 or 40 euros cheaper than us. And this is because of our investment in renewables. It's also because of our push for a better functioning market. Then there are the costs that are incurred within Greece. And here we are focused on 3 or 4 major initiatives that will help consumers. We are reducing the cost to the consumer from the theft of electricity. We are obviously connecting our islands, the most important one being Crete. This is a major cost that burdens consumers every year. As we connect our islands, that cost goes down. We have reduced significantly the cost of redispatching. I'm not going to go into the technical details of that, but it's a significant cost that burdens consumers. So there are certain elements where we can go and make a material impact on each one of those elements that collectively lead to a lower cost. And then finally, we have a final layer of interventions for specific use cases. So obviously, household consumers pay a much lower price than the EU average. In Greece, that has been true for several years now. Even if you adjust for purchasing power parity, Greek consumers get roughly at the EU average. If you look at farmers, we have certain exemptions from different levies and charges, and we also have a favorable tariff. For industry, we do a lot. We provide a compensation for the cost of CO2, and we have other exemptions or reductions in levies, and we're also finding ways, as the minister said, that are compatible with EU law to do more. So it's a multi-pronged strategy of how we're trying to deliver lower cost for consumers, and we think that we can see progress in all of these several dimensions to be able to deliver on this ultimate goal.
Thank you. Mr. Molnár, you mentioned before that Europe's LNG needs, import needs, will remain relatively high over the medium term. So what is the global outlook of the LNG supply?
Well, the good news is that when we are looking at the medium term, we see a very strong increase in global LNG liquefaction capacity. Our estimates, which are based on the official timelines of projects which either started construction or reached a final investment decision, by 2030, global LNG liquefaction capacity will increase by 300 billion cubic meters, and this would translate into around 250 BCM of net supply. What does 250 BCM means? It is roughly 3/4 of the European Union's natural gas demand today. So it is a huge increase. Who is driving that? Qatar and the United States together account for 70% of this incremental capacity. And what we expect is that this will lead to a shift from a seller's to a buyer's market. And it will enhance global energy security and ultimately will also improve the affordability of natural gas. And we are already seeing this happening. We also see that the marketing strategies of LNG companies are adopting to that new reality. We see that they are becoming more flexible in their delivery terms. So for instance, we see that by 2030, around half of the long-term contracts will be destination flexible. And when we are looking at the pricing, we see quite strong gains in terms of hub-indexed LNG contracts at the expense of oil indexation. Now, I do think that it is also important to recognize that this huge LNG wave creates major opportunities for Central and Eastern Europe. Central and Eastern Europe, back in 2021, imported around 50 BCM of Russian gas, and today this is at around 15 BCM. So clearly there is more efforts which needs to be done. And I think that in that picture, when we are looking at Central and Eastern Europe, we see that LNG regasification capacity has been increasing by more than 70% since the end of 2021. But very importantly, Greece alone accounts for 40% of the regasification capacity which is available for that region. So Greece is effectively providing a window for Central and Eastern Europe to the global LNG market. Of course, there is more efforts which needs to be done in terms of midstream interconnectivity, and I think that this is clearly progressing when we are looking at the Greece-Bulgaria interconnector, which is running very smoothly, and we also see all the great efforts which are being done to allow the optimal use of the vertical gas corridor. I think an additional element which needs to be considered is to strengthen the transatlantic partnership, including through long-term contracts, which ensure, on one hand, stable and secure LNG supplies, but also reduce price volatility, which I believe is a major concern for the European Union, but also to the countries of Central and Eastern Europe.
Thank you. Mr. Nikitas, you mentioned before, you highlighted actually the recovery and resilience facility. Could you possibly give us a specific short example where the reform and investments are mixed?
Okay, that's a tough question because I could talk forever because there's so many good investment reforms. I mean, we have the 100,000 so renovations that we hope to be completed by the summer, which for the first time, I mean, through the Ex-Economo, for the first time, the 30% is our target to have on average 30% primary energy savings. There is battery storage around 700 megawatt. We are hopeful that will be completed. But as you said, one specific example, and you put like reforms and investment. And again, not wading into the next panel, but we have the CCS, so the carbon capture storage. There was a legal framework adopted just last month, and we also have some regulatory decisions to complement that. So that's the legal framework. And then we actually have the support for the first CCS facility up in northern Greece. Actually, the 7th payment request that we are now assessing includes the storage permission for that facility. So, and that shows, I think, the leverage, the RRF, the positive leverage through the timeline, through defining specific milestones can use. I mean, obviously there might need to be fine-tuning, etc. But when you have a novel market, not only for Greece, but for Europe in general, I think this leverage, and also, what could I say, a bit conflicting private interest, I think the leverage that you have from outside through the RRF can be very positive, because if not, such reforms could be delayed and delayed until you kind of try to find. So I think that that's a positive way that I think the Greek authorities have used the leverage of the RRF. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that our time is up now. We're going to have many more questions, but just allow me to ask one last question to the minister, the Greek minister, regarding the Russian gas. And what is the landscape now regarding Russian gas, and what's going on with the upcoming ban?
Well, thank you for the chance to talk about this. I think the one thing I would want to stress is when we talk about banning Russian gas in Europe, remember that 80% or so of the phase out has already happened, right? So what we're really talking about is two remaining streams of gas. One is LNG, that goes primarily to 3 or 4 countries in sort of Western and Northwest Europe, and then pipeline gas that comes to our region. So really, when we say that Europe has decided to completely phase out Russian gas, this is in large part the Russian gas that is in our neighborhood, which also means our neighborhood is still the only part of Europe that receives significant volumes of Russian pipeline gas. In fact, if you look at the numbers, I was just looking at them yesterday, of what comes into Bulgaria, you had about 18 billion cubic meters that came into Bulgaria at the border with Turkey. Now, that's not all Russian gas, but a lot of it is. So when we talk about Greece supplying the region, we have to understand that we're talking about the replacement of volumes that are still coming in, that have actually grown in recent years as Russia became more aggressive and lowering prices to try to maintain or even increase its market share in the region. So we see a huge potential, but we're not there yet because we haven't banned Russian gas yet. And of course, we're going to be focused on the implementation of the ban and making sure that it's an airtight ban. So I think there is the story of the vertical corridor. We're just in the beginning of it. And I would also stress that, the vertical corridor has many elements to it. When we sell gas to Bulgaria, that's the vertical corridor. When we sell gas to Romania, that's the vertical corridor. When we sold gas to Moldova, becoming a critical supplier in a very difficult time for the country, that's the vertical corridor. When we try to sell gas to Ukraine, that's also the vertical corridor. So I think it's important to judge the vertical corridor in its totality, and not just to look at the more difficult part of the vertical corridor, which is really the Greece to Ukraine part, which has all the costs added to it, and what we knew from the beginning is going to be the most challenging part because it's the further away. So the two things I would say is, let's look at all the different avenues, because we have shown over the last few years that we can deliver gas from Greece to several partners. But also let's remember that we're talking about a corridor whose main purpose is to replace gas that is still there today. And so we're not really going to see the full blossom of this corridor until the bans on Russian gas start to being implemented and then fully completed by the end of 2027. So we see huge opportunities for us, and I would say that this is still a story that is being written.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our time is up. Minister, Mr. Molnár, Mr. Nikitas, thank you so much for your remarks, and thank you all for your attention.